And we're shooting live from the YouTube headquarters. Welcome everyone to the live stream today.
Too soon, Amos. Too soon.
Shots fired, literally. Welcome everyone to the Shitlord Preachers podcast. This is the 17th episode in the show. I am joined today by Brook Potter over in Trinidad and Tobago. I am here, of course, in Minnesota, where it is still, well, I shouldn't say still snowing. There is still snow on the ground, everyone. We got dumped on. Yeah, we got dumped on with snow in the last couple of days.
This is April.
Yeah, April. A couple of years ago, when I was in, a couple of years ago, we had snow in the first week of May.
Wow.
So, yeah. I've told you this. There's only been 1 month in the history of Minnesota that has not snowed.
Which is?
I think it's August. June. It's either July or August.
Right.
Because I've heard.
I would think summer probably is least likely. Sure.
Yeah, but it has snowed 10. It's snowed 11 out of the 12 months in a year.
That's crazy. What's wrong with you people?
So for those of you who do not know, the Shitlord Preachers basically is just where Brooke and myself, we used to be preachers, and we basically kind of got into the, I guess you could say, shitposting culture, and we felt this is a pretty cool name where not only can we kind of do a little bit of kind of online shitposting in our stream, but also have decent conversations about politics and the like. Now, today we were actually going to have Chris from the thinkliberty.com join us in the stream. A couple things didn't quite work out, so
you didn't just dox him, right? He's okay with his name being out there, right?
Yeah. No. His name's Chris. Yeah, we know this.
All right, just making sure.
They have a podcast and everything where they actually say their names. So
okay.
So we had some something didn't quite follow through. I possibly missed something somewhere, but we are gonna have him on. It's not like he's not coming on anymore. It's just scheduling kind of got a little mixed up, and we weren't able to get him on today. So so
that's kind of a thing, though, Amos. Like, of all the guests we've tried to have, which have been at least 5 or 6,
yeah,
we've only managed to score 2,
3.
You
can't have a supremacy because
right
for that.
I wasn't there. Okay, yeah, sure, okay.
And speaking of, we will actually be on the Happy Supremacy live stream next week.
Awesome.
So I'll definitely link to that. But yeah, so we're still following through to do a stream, and we're just gonna be kind of, shooting the shit. Although there has been a shooting that did take place, for those of you who don't know. So
I mean, Amos, it is the worst. I mean, it's terrible. Obviously, any kind of shooting is a tragedy,
of course.
Right? But what was the comment that I told you when we first heard about this thing?
Shots fired at YouTube.
Yeah. And what did I kind of said? Oh, it would be so great if this entire thing was kind of connected with the YouTube demonetization stuff. And I kind of said it in jest, somebody got so upset with their channel they went and shot up the headquarters.
And that's what happened.
And it appears, I mean, allegedly, it appears that seems to be what has happened. So you want to fill the people in? I mean, obviously, I'm sure they know.
Jeez. So basically, for those of you who do not know, there was an active shooter situation at the headquarters of YouTube. They weren't sure who it was. Basically, let's see here. Okay, here we go. So there was a shooter at YouTube, and basically she opened fired on Tuesday. Let's see here. She took a 9mm Smith & Wesson handgun to Silicon Valley campus and shot 3 people she apparently didn't know. People were definitely hurt, but actually,
so far nobody has died.
No, actually, no one died. One person was in serious condition, but and then she killed herself. So It was interesting. So well, actually, I'll do a quick little screen share here. Connect these. Let's see here. So yeah, oh Jesus. I don't want to see you, Anderson Cooper. I'm on CNN's website, and Anderson Cooper's face like popped up.
Oh, the humanity.
Yeah, I know it's a rough deal. So here we go. So this is her here, Nazim Najafi.
Yeah.
She was actually a YouTuber. I haven't looked at her videos or anything.
No, they've taken down the videos. The videos are gone.
Oh, okay. Some people have like mirrored it in different ways.
Sure. I think it's on Vimeo. You can still see them.
Yeah. So she had like 5,000 subscribers, and I guess she had some. Here we go. She was. Oh yeah, she was accusing YouTube of restricting some of her videos. So she had some issues basically with like some of their demonetization and censorship practices. Now, if you've seen some of her videos, it's not like she was saying like just ridiculously like. She wasn't like, you know, a political kind of thing. It was just weird, I guess.
Sure.
I've seen some of her videos, and she was just, anyways. So yeah, it was interesting because they here they're talking about this. I think. Do you remember how long ago exactly the Parkland shooting was?
Not exactly, no.
A couple. I'm hearing now, and people were saying it's like a month or two already. 2 months,
right?
I think.
Okay.
And we're still hearing about it.
About Parkland, you mean?
Yeah, we're still hearing about this David Hogg kid. We're hearing about that Emma Gonzalez girl. Like all these people that are involved in like the whole push, you know, the whole narrative pushing of gun control.
Yes.
You know, we know about this person because of the like this shooter at the YouTube campus because, you know, people like you and I tend to like keep up on this, but
sure,
it's not being pushed.
Yeah, there's no major narrative.
Yeah, she doesn't fit a narrative. She's a woman. She was a vegan.
Iranian. I mean, I don't know if she was Muslim or not, although that is possible.
Right, but basically, she's basically she's not straight white male. I mean, and of course, so I've seen all sorts of like comments on it where people are saying like she's just like, oh, it's just mental illness. There's nothing going on. It's, you know, they're just like, don't look. They're basically telling people, don't look into it. No, it's no big deal.
Yeah, it's an anomaly, so don't bother to look at it.
Exactly. But if it's a white man, then it's homegrown terrorism. We have an issue. We have a gun problem. Take away all the guns. So yeah. So
I mean, it's crazy at the end of the day. Because I caught, I don't know if you caught Tim Pool. He did a analysis on, you know, her videos and stuff like that. He's a guy that I watch quite regularly. He does like a daily podcast sort of thing. And like you say, nothing particularly overt. There were a couple exercise videos that she had, but I mean, it wasn't like she was in a bikini or anything. She was actually, you know, decently covered and stuff like that with like, you know, pants that go down to her knees almost and stuff. And, you know, I mean, it just seemed pretty innocuous. I mean, I've seen worse stuff coming out from Miley Cyrus and the MTV crowd, right? I mean, there's some music videos that are way worse than...
And they don't censor any of that.
And they don't censor. And I think this...
Not even age restricted.
No, and she talks about that, like her workout videos were age restricted, and she was complaining about how in a couple of her videos she got a lot of views. I don't know exactly how many, but they showed like her revenue from it was like 10 cents for like a couple 100,000 views. And, you know, so a lot of people are saying, well, you know, she only had 5,000 subscribers and stuff, so she probably wasn't making that much money. I mean, I've got less than 1,000 subscribers from basically my two channels. And I was still clearing about 100 US in views, like every quarter, maybe a little bit more, like recently before I got demonetized.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, if you're living on the cheap, like if you're living on the cheap in the US, you know, a couple $150, $100, that might actually make a difference, you know? So And again, it's not all about the subscribers. Like I got one of my biggest videos, I think is close to 30,000 views. I've got just about 500 subscribers, but a lot of people are watching the videos. So that's not necessarily a reflection of how much money the person's actually making, you know?
Right.
So I don't know. It's tough. And of course, nothing's going to come of this, right? YouTube is going to sweep this under the rug.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, some people are also pointing out the fact that obviously it is in a very heavily gun controlled area. I mean,
sure.
it's YouTube headquarters. It's leftist central.
Pretty much.
No one has a gun there, except maybe a couple guards, on the outside. But inside, no one in there probably even, employees in there probably don't have any guns at home or don't know anything about guns. They're just like, I mean, it's a very vulnerable situation.
Correct.
If you're getting past any security, they're all screwed in there, Yeah, and then of course, excuse me, there was plenty of memes, of course, of her.
Are you gonna do a meme review? Are you gonna do
no,
review?
No. All I heard was there's apparently some rumor about how she was like looking for some ex-boyfriend or something.
I heard that. But I mean, you don't shoot random people if you're looking for an ex-boyfriend, which is why that kind of fell apart.
Well, I mean, and if she was looking for her boyfriend, well, he dodged a bullet, literally.
Oh, too soon, man. Too soon.
I think, it's you can't. Yeah, it's interesting how like I don't know how does a YouTube thing like make you go nuts and shoot yourself and 3 people.
I mean, she was quite an activist. Like I saw a couple videos of her and some pictures where she's holding up a sign. YouTube discriminates, and if you want more information, come to her blog, whatever her blog was on WordPress or whatever it was. So she was actually quite active into this idea of YouTube kind of discriminating against her and stuff like that. So I mean, it didn't just happen overnight. This has been a continuing trend of hers for a while. And I mean, at the end of the day, we'll never really know, which is unfortunate because, it would have actually been nice to understand the motivations involved in this situation. But sometimes you just know. Just like, I mean, you sent me the video about the guy in Vegas where the police...
Oh, yep. They have a video now. The New York Times has a full... Basically, they have an organized video of all the surveillance footage, as well as some information they've gotten on the Vegas shooter, basically like where he went, how long he was there, basically in a very nice streamlined sort of recalling of the events leading up to the shooting. Like how many, like they actually showed footage of him getting suitcases up to his room, how he would leave, come back, go to a shooting range, come back. And, what he was doing at the casino, he didn't seem suspicious at all. He just had a lot of bags, which is not entirely out of the ordinary in terms of like to really cause any, rise of suspicion or anything. So, that was actually like I guess you could say planned out kind of thing.
Sure. And we still don't even have the motivations for what drove him to do the Vegas shooting at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah. There's still, I mean, but he went through quite a bit of planning, which was pretty interesting. Did you watch that video though?
Yeah. I watched the whole thing, and I mean, I was very impressed with how they put it together.
20 some odd like suitcases and bags in his room, and he's like setting up.
Yeah.
Like 2 rooms connected. It was just like, wow. Like, so I think that video and the footage and everything kind of flies in the face of the whole conspiracy theory too, of like,
sure.
How he was set up or whatever, and maybe it wasn't him. How could he man all those weapons? Well, he probably had, anyways.
Yeah. All the
Not to get too into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, this whole gun narrative is definitely kind of going all over the place because any white male who shoots anywhere is instantly like center of national attention. I
Yeah.
think right after the Parkland shooting, there was a teacher that was in a school that shot off one round
Right.
and no one got hurt.
Yeah.
But they made a huge deal about how guns are just extremely dangerous and everything.
Right.
But then if someone else stops an active shooter, no one talks about it. If someone shoots off a shot but doesn't hurt anyone, everyone talks about it. If someone kills a bunch of people, everyone, I mean, obviously should talk about it, but it's always only certain, if only certain parameters are met, do you hear a lot about it. It has to be a white male or just a male in general who maybe can pass off as white, can someone who probably can also, you can throw in, you know, make them look disturbed.
Yes.
And so then you make it, you kind of throw out, I mean, mental health is definitely an issue, but you kind of make this arbitrary, just sort of, oh, mental illness.
Yes.
Well, what exactly about mental illness? And I was listening to Joe Rogan talk about this, like, because he actually talked about the YouTube shooting. I guess the cops found her the day before the shooting.
I heard that her family was kind of
Yeah, they
worried
were
she was going through
concerned. It was
something,
like two
and
in
they
the
called the
morning,
police. Yeah.
and the police went to her, and you know, and basically concluded she's just out of it. But
Right.
you know, she doesn't seem like any real threat. And if you look at the photos, some of the videos or photos that people have of her, she doesn't really look like that much of a threat in general.
I would agree. I agree.
So the cops are like, yeah, whatever. And so he was talking with this guy on his podcast, and they basically kind of hit on like, at what point do you have to do something? And Joe Rogan's basically saying like, well, you really can't do anything until the person does something.
Correct. You can't have pre-crime.
Yeah, you just can't. Because there's just so many things. People could just act weird. Now, there's obviously like things that could, I think, are very clear. Like he brought up like, people who've known people to like just start stockpiling weapons and have very like, I guess, I don't know, views that would, like if they're talking about government in a certain way, not so much like a certain an overall distrust of government, but actually like expressing views against government or against police or just certain institutions in a manner where you have like a high chance of acting out on certain views.
Yeah. I mean, it's the CIA is watching me, and did you notice that white van parked outside for the last week, sort of thing.
And then if he said like, well, I have to, and you started, stockpiling weapons and saying,
yeah,
think something's going to happen kind of thing. Okay, maybe you definitely want to start, okay, calling the cops. Hey, this is what's going on. Let them handle it. Now, if, you're just, have a gun and you're a white male and you're just kind of, expressing very basic libertarian views, being very anti-statist, but no actual like hard-lining statements.
Yeah,
can't really do anything. I mean, that's gonna be me at some point this year when I get a gun.
Pretty much.
And I have
pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, as you say, you can't have pre-crime, and the truth is you cannot legislate against the guy who decides, or girl who decides that is the day they're going to go over the edge, right?
Yeah.
There is literally nothing you can do. And I mean, given the example of what's going on in the UK right now, even if you did away with the guns, like we have a huge illegal gun problem and stabbings and other things like that, So yeah, it's not a mass shooting, but we get mass stabbings instead, right? So people running around with butter knives and other kinds of crazy things, right?
The butter knives, man. Those really get to get you.
Yeah. Like the police in the UK, they like do these shots of like seizing weapons, and there's a bunch of butter knives and scissors and other crap from basically the kitchen. But the truth is, like, at least in the US, there's nothing you could do. There's nothing you can do to prevent the guy. So even in your example, like, okay, the guy's stockpiling weapons. He's, doing some paranoia CIA stuff. All right, you're going to call the police. They're going to come and question that guy, but they can't do anything. They might throw him in prison overnight, or sorry, in jail overnight, for holding, just to kind of calm him down, maybe bringing us. But they really cannot do anything in that scenario until that person goes over the edge.
Right. You're innocent until you're proven guilty. But then again, you're innocent until you actually do anything.
Yeah, and you need to display some kind of mental disorder before they'll bring in like psychologists, and like if you can demonstrate some serious, mental disorder in that time, yeah, they could do something. But you still have to be reflecting not just the speech. You need to be reflecting the behavior in line with like a psychotic break or a PTSD episode or something.
Right.
So it's tough. The law enforcement has a very, very difficult job, and we have to recognize that. Now, to the point that you were making, though, this is what I find is so interesting about American news coverage on this issue. There are mass black shootings on a huge scale in places like Chicago and Baltimore and all these other things. Right.
About that.
and right. So that's exactly my point, is that it's not talked about in the national media because, oh my God, it's another black person killed a black person. That's not a narrative that people are interested in, unfortunately.
Right.
When, as you said, if it's a white person, a white guy, or even a Latino, like there've been a couple people who've been on the fringe. Like if you watch some of the mass shooters, there's been an Asian, there's been a lot of Latinos, and all this other stuff. I mean, MS-13 in California is not exactly known for like helping old ladies cross the road, right? None of that is talked about. None of it.
Yeah.
The problem is with apparently white male Americans. That's the greatest threat in the United States, which is absolute nonsense.
I want to bring something else into the conversation. So I told you about the cop that I met.
No. Oh yeah, you were telling me. Yes.
So just for the viewers too. For my job, I come across like different people. I'll just say it that way. And I got to meet a cop at on one of my work days, and spoke to her about just as I was. Huh?
Was she cute?
I think no. I mean, definitely cuter than the average female cop. I'd probably say that.
Fair enough.
She was, kind of telling me, like, as I was speaking to her, we kind of gauged, like, there was this, with my job, you can't really discuss politics, but then, like, it's not like anyone's going to honor that perfectly. So I usually try to gauge when I speak with, clients and such to see, where they are. And, of course, but yeah, so I'm bringing up these, the conversation about guns, and she's kind of like, yeah, she owns a gun, this and that. And she starts kind of talking about the, sort of the crime trends in the town that she works in. She works in a decent sized city of about 50 or 60,000 people. And so she starts talking about, obviously like police, like being spread thin. So in her town, in her city, there are only 60 police officers
for the whole city
for 60,000 people. Yeah,
that's really tough. Sure,
and it's a college town,
right?
So at certain events, there's fights. There's bars. There's just things can break out and happen. Now it's definitely not like an inner city. It's not like a city. It's a city, but it's not like Minneapolis, St. Paul city.
Right. A couple million people, and yeah.
But it's just, yeah. So she starts talking about the gun statistics, how a majority of the guns they confiscate, whether in a crime or having a report of, illegally owned guns, firearms and such. Majority are illegally owned or stolen. They're not supposed to own it, or they stole it, which is interesting.
Sure.
And then I asked her about the, different things on gun policy, like, sort of suspending someone's right to have weapons. Well, it's not really even suspension. It's, we've talked about this gun restraining order that they talked about, where was it friends or family members could basically petition a court to suspend someone's right to carry for a short period of time. And she'd said that they have something similar where actually the individual with the guns has to report this. Basically, an individual who maybe has anything from one gun to small arsenal could basically call the police and say, "Hey, this is what's going on. I'm not feeling too good, mentally.
Take
can you come by and take my guns?"
Right.
And it's not necessarily revoking of rights. It's just she didn't say anything about the carry license being suspended or anything. She just said they would come by, pick up the guns, and hold on to them until he goes to see, psychiatric help. Once he is given a clean bill of health, he goes back. They give him his guns back.
It's good. It's good.
So, but it requires him to reach out first, which is definitely a step. But for people who maybe won't reach out,
it takes a great deal of self-awareness to be able to do that. Not everybody's got that, but
So basically that's kind of the things she was telling me. She even talked about like some of the carry laws in Minnesota where she was kind of helping me understand that I don't have to go get a purchase permit to purchase. I could just go straight to carry, which includes purchasing, so I can just I don't have to spend more money. And it's like a one-day class you take to be able to carry. But yeah, and so it's just interesting to kind of see the reality of things. And also she was noticing as well, cars kill more people than guns do.
Yeah,
it's also very strict on how your gun carry licensing works.
Does the license expire in the US?
I think it's in Minnesota. I think she said it's every 5 years.
Okay, so you do have to renew your carry license. Okay.
And it's cheaper to renew. It's a cheaper overall process than your driver's license. See, with a driver's license, you could have all sorts of crimes, felonies, and such, and still be able to drive.
Right.
With a carry permit, if you have a felony, you don't own a gun.
Yeah, actually, who was it? I was listening to somebody was talking about that there really needs to be a lot more information about the things how people could lose their constitutional right to carry. And they talk about the young kids, college kids, girlfriend, boyfriend might get into an argument or something like that. And,
the misdemeanor of a domestic assault, I think it is.
Yeah.
So if you're caught in that, you don't own a gun, period. You just never will.
Yeah.
In that, which is considered a misdemeanor. It's not a felony. So it's the only gross misdemeanor that you can actually get in trouble for. For carrying. You're not gonna, but if to bring up an old conversation, other gross misdemeanors include messing with car registrations, prostitution.
Yeah. Right.
If you do those, you can still own a gun. And I asked her, I said, well, what about DWI and DUIs? Drinking and driving. She goes, well, no. However,
if you have a gun on you.
If you have a gun on you while you're drunk, she said if you blow a .04, which is half the legal limit,
right,
you will never own a gun again, legally at least.
Sure.
And that's the thing too. She brought up the truth. Yeah, if anyone wants a gun, they're gonna get a gun.
And that's coming from the police. The police understand that.
Yeah, they're like, yeah.
I mean, I'll put it to you this way, Amos. Anybody who wants weed is going to get weed, but weed is illegal, right?
1 in 6 individuals in America has smoked weed on some sort of regular basis. Smoke weed, I should say.
Yeah, I'll take it even further than that, right? The most state-controlled entity in the entire world is the prison system, right? Everything is scanned, everything is on lockdown, everybody's on camera, everything. And you could still get drugs in prison.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you about
just because you have laws, just because you have controls, shit's still gonna happen.
Yeah, this is I mean, I comment about it all the time in the UK, right? Because our constitution comprises of basically 3 words, which is
You don't
parliament
have a
is sovereign.
constitution.
Well, our constitution is parliament is sovereign, right? It's 3 words. They could do whatever the fuck they want, right? It's parliament could do whatever they want.
Right.
But basically, they take it to heart. They really believe if they write a piece of paper, that's just going to magically make everything disappear.
Say magic.
Yeah, they really believe it. Like politicians are so bought into their own Kool-Aid that they actually believe this nonsense, right? And given that the city of London has recently spiked in crime to levels above New York City for the first time in I think maybe 30 or 40 years, even though we have the most ridiculous gun control laws that you could imagine, right?
Yeah.
In fact, self-defense in my country is technically illegal.
You've also got Merkel's Legos everywhere. I mean, it's a war zone over there.
Well, it's not a I can't say it's a war zone, but it's.
I mean, you're
it's
about
not
to
a
hit
utopian,
into
peaceful paradise.
Yeah, you're about to get into police state territory if you keep going down that path.
Yeah, and of course, all of it is ineffective, right? We got Russians coming across with their mafias. We've got Eastern Europeans coming across, and they see that basically crime is not the high on the priorities. People don't have guns. They're not allowed to really defend themselves. What do you think is going to happen? Yeah, the Russian mafia is very heavy.
You have actual Russians there, whereas here, where we just have rumors of Russians.
Right. No, we actually do have Russians. Like the city the city that has the most spies and counter agents operating and like mafia is London. London has the biggest underground crime movement in the European hemisphere. Because it's the gateway to the West, and just as I say, the money is best there. And it's the safest place for them to operate because they know that the police are not really going to do anything.
Right.
They could operate without impunity. Like I was talking to my girlfriend about this, Holly. And the only thing you can buy for self-defense legally in the United Kingdom is a rape alarm.
A what?
A rape alarm.
Rape alarm?
It's basically this device you put around your pants that acts kind of like a belt, and if anybody tries to like rip your pants off, it pulls out the cord and it makes a loud noise. That's
it. A keychain?
Well, they have different types of them. It's kind of like a keychain. It could be like a belt. There are different things like that. That is the only legal thing you can buy in the UK for self-defense.
Oh, Jesus. So, it was interesting when you brought up the drugs in the prison system. You remember the game Prison Architect?
Yeah, I still play it every so often.
Yeah. Every time, I mean, obviously, so this is a video game, so it's not like proper context, it's not, but it's just hilarious. Every time you do like contraband checks, you always get something. There's always shanks, needles, drugs, whatever, contraband, all this stuff. Every time you could do it, but for those of you who don't know, Prison Architect is a game where it's a simulation game where you build a prison, and you actually build like sort of like a 2D rendition of a prison. You place guards, you take in prisoners, you try to make money. Obviously, it's basically private prison 101, the simulation. So you're doing all this, and then of course you can do like a check of contraband, make sure the prisoners confiscated any contraband. And it's funny, but if you do it too often, the prisoners get real rowdy. You don't do it often enough, more stuff can happen. But it's funny that if you keep just clicking it and keep doing it, you're going to keep getting stuff. The game just has that as a thing that happens. And it's funny because in reality, that is very true. You just have stuff in prison.
Correct. And I mean, that is the full onslaught of government power and control. And they still can't keep drugs, contraband, weapons out because as you say, they have to do shakedowns. They have to like check the cells and whatever. So you can't control it. You cannot control human behavior. And what makes it more dangerous, of course, is when things are illegal.
Right.
So, like for us in the UK, like you're talking about the concealed carry laws, we don't have any of that. right? Guns in the UK are strictly for sport. So like I live in a very interesting area, let's call it that. A guy got stabbed like just outside, like on my block, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple drug houses like within walking distance. I mean, it's a pretty, it's a good area, but it's kind of dodgy. There's a lot of dodginess in my neighborhood, right? So if I go to the police and I say, well, look, I'm kind of concerned for my safety. I want to get a gun for self-defense, right? That's illegal because that's admitting I want to buy a weapon with the intent of doing bodily harm to somebody else.
Regardless of context for them.
Regardless of context. So we do not have self-defense laws in the UK.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to defend yourself. Let me retract that. There are very strict criteria that constitutes self-defense, right? And it has to be reasonable force. So if somebody breaks into my house,
right,
and I pull a gun on them, right, that's excessive force because they didn't come with a gun.
So here's just a throw this out too then. So when I was in high school, well, it was high school, middle school, just in school in general, they've changed. And this is school, so it's kind of like whatever. There's no real like rule of law, so to speak, when it comes to this. But if you were, bullying is a huge problem in schools, I think, across the world. But we'll just say for the sake of the discussion in the U.S. So, if anyone ever gets in a fight, it's essentially no fault to anyone. Let's say if I get punched by someone,
right,
and I get punched again let's say I get punched multiple times by someone. If I even start to defend myself, I'm just as in trouble.
Right.
Now
that's in school.
No, that's in school. No, but I mean, and parents have thought that's been ridiculous because, depending on the area you're in, if your kid's getting beat up all the time and he's going to get in trouble for defending himself.
Yeah.
Not to like, bring a knife or a gun, but like.
Sure. Just, putting up your dukes and, getting ready to lay it down.
Yeah, or just, end it. Just like.
Sure.
Like you knock my books down, I'll just, push you down.
Yeah.
Don't do it anymore, but no, you have to just take it until someone steps in to stop it.
That is the UK.
And that is the UK.
Is basically middle school in the United States.
We were going to kind of talk about this when we were going to have Chris on to talk about, and I'm not going to get too into it. Basically, the monopoly of violence that the state has.
Correct.
Where even in the U.S., in the end, the only entity that is allowed essentially free reign over violence to whatever degree it sees fit is the state.
Correct.
Constitutional rights or not. I'm not saying, now I'm not going to go and say, the police can just kill you tomorrow. But if it was you really look at it, it comes down to it, they can do more than you really think.
There's a loophole though in the US, which is self-defense.
Right. We do have self-defense. So, we have rights, we have things in place to keep that in check.
Correct.
But
self-defense is, at least in most states, I believe, is justifiable violence.
Oh yeah.
Right.
What I'm getting at mainly is, but now that is being put on, that's still, you still have things that gives the state too much power over the people, where it's like, so like, I'll just throw this, civil asset forfeiture.
Civil asset forfeiture. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Where
that's property rights. Yeah, it's where they take your stuff.
Yeah, on the grounds that your stuff will commit a crime.
Right. I'm sure that's not the only reason they do it, but sure. Okay.
Well, let's say hypothetically, if let's say if I had 10 grand in my pocket and I cross the state line, and because I'm going somewhere, now I have every right. It's $10,000. It's my money. It's in my pocket or whatever. Whether I'm going gambling or if I'm just lending money to someone or if I'm just traveling.
Hookers and blow.
Exactly. That's my right. I want to go to a state where that's all legal. Sure. Or, easier to get away with.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm going
Vegas,
somewhere.
baby.
Exactly. So I'm going somewhere, and let's say a cop pulls me over.
Yeah.
And maybe sees it. Maybe I have a paper bag with the money. I don't know. I'm just, and
Sure.
he says, "Well, why do you have this money?" "Oh, I'm going to Vegas."
Yeah.
He can actually confiscate that money.
Right.
Because he could be suspicious that the money's going to be used in some sort of illegal activity. That's what I'm saying.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
This has actually happened.
I get
People
the
have
premise.
carried large amounts of money, whether it's through a loan or they're loaning someone or someone lended them money.
Yeah.
And the police confiscate it.
Right.
And even in cases where people search homes, they can confiscate. Yeah. So not to get too into that because I want to save a lot of that for when we do get Chris on the show.
Right.
But yeah, it's just it's a very I think it's a very concerning thing for a government to take away the rights of its citizens to defend themselves, to basically say anything within our borders, you can't be on your own. Like it's a reliance on the state to protect,
I mean, that's basically what it is in the UK. Like,
yeah. And I think it's a fundamental flaw in understanding of what is the role of the state.
Agreed.
Yeah. People say, well, what is the role of government? Oh, well, in my view, I mean, it's just to protect, I would say protect our borders.
Right. It's to protect the rights of your citizen from foreign and domestic threats.
Right. Now, do we take that to the degree of, ultimate, defense against domestic threats? The police state?
Well, threats to your rights, right? Not necessarily
threats.
Right, threats in general, but it's to protect your rights,
right.
Which are as you know, Constitution, Bill of Rights, inalienable rights.
Unalienable, yeah. And the idea of unalienable rights is a very tricky thing to explain to people, even to the, your more centrist people. But you're basically telling them, well, the founding fathers basically believed in rights that were given to us by a creator that you cannot take away, and the only role the state will play in those rights is to defend them that are already there.
Correct.
So the founding fathers basically believed the Bill of Rights were just an interpretation of, if you want to call
inalienable rights.
Yeah. Well, if you want to call it divinely or God-given rights.
Yeah, divine right.
Yeah. And the state is just there to write it down and say, we protect this.
Yeah, no. I mean, that is, if you want to be legitimate about the U.S. Constitution, that is the role of the U.S. government.
Yeah.
Right? Is to protect the rights of its citizens from foreign and domestic threats. Now, in the UK, it's the complete opposite because Parliament is sovereign. So basically, Parliament is God, right? The divine rights come from Parliament, right? So unlike other countries, I think there was a great meme I saw about that. Maybe I got it from you, where it said, in the US, like in most countries, they think the government gives them the right to do certain things.
A lot of people think that even in the States.
Yeah, but in the US, it's like, no, the people have the rights and the government really, can't intrude upon it. And that level of thinking, I mean, it's unfortunate it's not very common in Europe in general and the UK. I mean, it's how I think. I believe in inalienable rights.
Yeah.
And, so when I hear these kinds of stupid statements coming out from Parliament and how they're going to wave this magic wand and make all these problems disappear by censoring people and curtailing free speech and making it illegal to defend yourself and this other stuff, it's cringe for me, right? It's like absolute cringe. Like these people have no idea how intrusive on the dignity of humanity and human rights they're really crushing through these acts, so yeah, it's ridiculous.
I saw a meme. It was a picture of like a cop like pepper spraying someone on the ground.
Yeah.
That said, if you don't want anarchy, what do you call this?
Right. Interesting.
Now, and now I'm not. Now, again, I'm not advocating for anarcho-capitalism,
Right. Right.
let alone anarcho-communism, which is a whole other thing.
Don't get me started. But
For
yeah,
those
yeah.
of you who saw the video of me watching on my channel here, I did a couple of political sort of spectrum tests and stuff, and Chris, who was going to be on the show, he was full ANCAP.
Really, he ended up in the bottom right, like on the apex.
Yeah, no, because so that's like, 100 is the furthest out to the right, and then 100 down is like the most libertarian views, because you have your.
Right.
So he was 100, negative 100, the edge of the quadrants.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
And I was like 80 and 80, like 80 over 80 down. So I was libertarian capitalist, where like, which gives kind of lines up with what I believe, like, okay, minarchist.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like Josh from Sarcasm and Liberty was saying, a minarchist with ANCAP tendencies. And I was like, I'm like, what, you do lines of ANCAP and while you're doing to keep yourself even keeled so you can still be a minarchist?
Yeah, he's a cool guy. They were good guys.
He's like, we maybe need a little bit of state, but no state. Yeah.
I'm part of the anybody who knows, I'm part of the liberalist group, which is Sargon of Akkad. He's founded this liberalist movement and stuff like that.
British neckbeard libertarianism.
And this is the fact of the matter is, it is libertarianism.
Yeah.
But because it's run by a bunch of young kids who they've now come to the revelation of freedom and liberty and stuff. They're all fresh and, as we say, wet behind the ears. They're trying to say, well, we're not really libertarians. And I get really, I'm kind of like, listen to me. All liberalists, all of the principle of the liberalists are libertarian principles, right? So all liberalists are libertarians. Now, not all libertarians are liberalists, because all liberalists tend to have like a role for the state. They still believe in the religion of the NHS. They still believe in, the state having a right to tax.
So it's kind of neoliberalism.
Somewhat, but this is the thing. The liberalists, they're trying to be distinct, and they're trying to do this purity test where they're against guns, they're against certain things. They still believe in, taxation and all this other stuff. While the libertarian movement is more mature and it's grown out, and we know we go all the way from Murray Rothbard and the ANCAPs, right across to like a Ron Paul, which is almost like a mainstream Republican in some aspects, with strong libertarian principles.
And taxation is theft.
Yeah, so they all espouse taxation as theft, but you don't see Ron Paul trying to, fight against taxation, right? He'll try to lower taxes, but he's not trying to abolish taxes.
There's some cutting of spending. I mean, Rand Paul was definitely like hating that omnibus bill and everything.
Oh yeah, no, totally libertarian principles. But let's face it, Rand Paul is still under technically the blanket of a Republican. But that's my point. The libertarian blanket covers everything in between,
right?
Which is great. We, as Penn Jillette, the magician, once said, between the anarchists or the ANCAPs and the libertarians, we will agree for years dismantling Leviathan, which is the state intervention, before you ever come to any kind of real disagreement. You could have years of agreement about lower taxes, releasing regulation, all these different things. But in Europe, the liberalists, there's no disagreement, right? They don't allow disagreement. And this is what's killing that movement, which is why I'm not really paying much attention to you guys anymore.
Just use this. So what you're saying is,
yeah,
liberalists can be like sort of like an SJW.
Yeah, they have this, because I see it all the time. Well, obviously people who are in the group, they'll see it all the time. They're always trying to distinguish themselves apart from libertarianism. So the main liberalist group, the Americans have taken it over, and it's straight up libertarianism. Great.
Hijacked it.
Yeah, they've retreated to the UK group, and they're trying to distinguish themselves apart from libertarianism on the issues of
Dude,
guns.
you should do a series of videos on that.
I don't want to pick a fight with them. It's not worth it because it's going to implode for itself. What's that? What's that?
It's going to get you a notoriety, and it's like, you know,
they're just young, right? The group is young. The main group is run by, it looks like university students, so they're fresh to a lot of these things. I'm like going to be 38 this year. I've been a pretty much an anarcho-capitalist since I was about 25, maybe younger. I was always a conservative since about the time of 18, and I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? And I've gone through the Mises Institute, and I've read Murray Rothbard, you know, the great thinkers Hayek and Adam Smith and stuff. I mean, okay, I've got a lot of time going through these things. These guys are kind of fresh to it and that stuff. Nothing wrong with that. They're all on a learning curve. But their inability to cross platforms, to work with other people who may not agree on everything, that's what's kind of killing the movement.
Right.
Right. But with the libertarian, which is why I still identify as a libertarian rather than a liberalist, is because we have that blanket. And we know it covers that spectrum, and we will work with anybody. Like, you and I have friends who are minarchists, anarchists, you know, probably more conservative Republicans, and we all agree on the vast majority of things. And I think that's you're not going to make any difference if you don't have that kind of maturity, you know.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, I just can't think. The little instigator to me is thinking, like, do a series of, like, actually do some research on liberalists and just be like, y'all are a bunch of basically libertarian, you know, statists with libertarian values, SJWs.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, that actually is a very accurate description. At least a couple of them that I've dealt with. I don't want to give anybody's names. I'm not embarrassing anybody, but I get it. They're a young movement. They're trying to preserve the movement. But I mean, like,
have them on the show.
I'm always considering it. Like, a lot of people are libertarian. And the biggest fight that goes on within this group is, again, they don't want to be known as libertarian because they think they're all ANCAPs. And we try to explain to them, it's like, no, it's a spectrum. But the fact is, the Libertarian Party in the UK is over 10 years old. They have run elections. They've actually gotten people elected to city councils. You know, they have all of the infrastructure in place. So any of these people who want to, like, get involved in politics now should seriously join the Libertarian Party, because it's like, you know, the furthest thing along to making any kind of substantial inroads. But they don't want to do that because of this purity test, right? Because they think it's all, you know, anarchists.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you know you're not dealing with people who are serious about change. Because if you're not willing to use the resources and things that you have available to you now, even if you don't 100% agree, you're an idealist and you're not very much used to a lot of people, you know?
Right. One thing I wanted to kind of get into, because I know, yeah, it's good that we're talking about all this, but I wanted to, you sent me this article.
Oh, right. Yeah. Let me touch on this nonsense.
Okay. I'll pull it up here. Unless, do you want to pull it up on yours?
No, you could pull it up there, man.
Here. So, BBC. Hither Green?
Yeah, Hither Green is the area. So basically, the long and short of this story is that a pensioner, a guy of 78.
Richard Osborne Brooks. That's
him. Two gentlemen broke into his house and basically held him at gunpoint. Well, not gunpoint, at screwdriver point. Screwdriver. To basically burgle his house and stuff like that. And a struggle ensued, and he managed to get a hold of the screwdriver from one of the assailants, and he ended up stabbing him with it. The other assailant ran. He called the police came, and the guy that he stabbed ended up dying.
Ooh.
And as a result of that, the police came back and arrested him for murder.
Oh, jeez.
Right? And this goes back to this whole question about we don't have self-defense laws in the UK, right? And to give you an idea of how crazy this whole thing is, right? any object that you have in your possession with the intent to cause harm to another human being is considered an assault weapon, and it's illegal. That could be a knife, that could be a gun, that could be a lamp.
At least they understand the folly of calling something an assault whatever.
Right.
Because, you know, the whole assault rifle thing in the US, it's like, that's such a dumb thing because it's not a proper term.
Correct.
At least the UK understand if something's being used in an assault, it is an assault, whatever.
It's an assault weapon, right? So, and to make the distinction about what I'm talking about, right? Like if it is that you have a bat, like, you know, a baseball bat, and you just happen to keep it by your bed for protection, right? You know, just in case, you don't know. That's technically an assault weapon, means that you have intentionally bought this item for the purpose to do harm to other people. That's illegal, and you'll be arrested.
Oh, jeez.
But if you say the same bat is in your house, and let's say a burglar breaks into your house, and you use the bat against the burglar, and they ask you why why did you have the bat by your bed? You have to say, if you want to get off on self-defense, you have to say you bought it because you like baseball. You cannot say you bought it because you want to defend yourself, because that automatically makes it an assault weapon.
Jeez.
That is so self-defense in the UK, and I just learned this. I might actually do a full-on video on this, or I might take this clip out, right? Self-defense in the UK has to be, you have to use reasonable force against your intruder.
Which is subjective.
It is subjective. So if he comes in unarmed and you pull a weapon, that's greater force. Any kind of mechanical advantage is greater force. So if they come in unarmed, you have to fight them unarmed, right? If they come in with a weapon, you have to basically show an equivalent amount of force. You cannot have excessive force, right? There has to be no other choice, right? So the jury will basically ask you, could you have run to avoid the confrontation? So you basically have to say there was no choice. They were blocking me in. I felt imminent danger. Now, contrary to what people believe, you don't actually have to be attacked. But if you feel threatened enough, there has to be significant evidence of threat for you to lash out in some kind of self-defense activity. And again, whatever you use in this scenario, it cannot be for the intent of bodily harm to another human being.
Wait. Couldn't that then go in so many different wrong directions? Because it could justify unjust violence while also delegitimizing legitimate need of force.
There is none. This is my point. Self-defense is illegal.
But I'm saying what I'm getting at is because you were saying imminent danger. If you feel imminent danger, what if you're just triggered and you say you feel imminent danger to act out? And then on the other end, where you felt illegitimate danger and you acted out, but they said you were excessive. See what I'm saying?
Right, then you get arrested. Yeah, exactly. If you were excessive. So for instance, right, just to give an example. Somebody breaks
into... If I was carrying a gun, let's just say hypothetically I was carrying a gun, no intention to do anything, but I'm walking, somewhere. Right. And someone just came up with a baseball bat and knocked me down and beat me within an inch of my life. Right. The court would probably say that person is in the right because I had the advantage, and that person felt imminent danger and just beat me when I actually had no intention to harm them. And then on the other end, where I have a baseball bat and the guy comes in unarmed, and I beat him because he's threatening to steal my stuff.
Yeah,
I'm in the wrong.
Correct.
See what I'm getting at? Where it could get flipped.
Yeah, in your first scenario, it has to be a little more complicated than you just walking down the road with a gun, though. So in that scenario, because that technically they are actually assaulting.
But then here's another thing too. Maybe I'm a neighbor.
Yeah.
I hear a disturbance next door.
Right.
I get my gun and go and help you. But then it's through the commotion, you beat me up.
Right.
And now I'm in trouble for trying to help you.
Yeah.
Maybe later on you do say, oh crap. But then the jury would say, wait, definitions.
Correct. And that is why this type of legislation, because there is no self-defense.
Right.
Real self-defense law. You actually don't have the right to defend yourself. So as I say, you have, in order to get off on self-defense, you have to have all of that criteria. Can't be excessive force, imminent threat, unavoidable, and if there's any kind of mechanical advantage that you have, right, you increase your likelihood of prosecution. So if there's a gun involved, you could be charged. Illegal, legal gun, if it's illegal, you'll probably be locked up for sure.
Right.
And again, some of it is subjective. Like, so we've seen cases where people have broken into homes in the countryside, which is, you know, outside the cities and stuff like that, where hunting rifles and stuff like that are quite common, right? So a guy gets shot in a house in the country, the police kind of say, well, you took the risk of going into the house in the country, which is probably armed. You kind of look for your own stupidness. But then if you do that, if the same thing happens in the city, so a guy breaks into a house in the city and the guy has a registered legal firearm and they get shot, it's a different outcome because that's not presupposed in the city. Jeez. The exact same crime, but totally subjectively interpreted. And this is the state of the self-defense laws in the UK.
And it's the jury or the court that decides sort of the context and the
if it's murder, if the person gets physically harmed, then it's murder. And just for instance, so let's say, you know, a woman is at a bar and a drunk guy comes up to her and tries to tear her clothes off, right? Reasonable response, basically she could kick him in the balls, right? But the minute he's on the ground, if she does anything to him after that, that's no longer self-defense because the threat has been diminished the minute the drunk hits the ground.
Oh, Jesus.
Right? So even if she tries to you know, I don't know, kick him and stuff like that to get like a running start to get away from it, the minute she does anything else to him to try and keep him on the ground longer so she could escape, that's no longer self-defense.
This is such bullshit.
It is. It is absolute bullshit. I mean, I thought the tax laws were bad, but when I saw this, I was like, holy crap, this is, I mean, it's absolutely, and even Sargon of Akkad, Carl Benjamin, you know, big fan of Sargon of Akkad. I posted the same, well, not me, but he posted this article in the liberalist group, and everybody's like, the man has done nothing wrong, this, that, and the other, and they do not understand the law, that this is the insanity that we're dealing with in the UK. So we've already seen the nonsense with Count Dankula in context, and
that's why I was bringing up the court deciding on context.
Correct.
Because they decided the context of his video when he knew the context.
Correct. And they can decide the context of your supposed self-defense. And it's not a strong
in anything.
Yeah, if content is, you know, king, context is God, right? Mm-hmm. The ultimate truth of everything is context. So the courts in the UK can basically decide the context of your self-defense. And it's a very, very slippery slope. And we've seen grandmothers to avoid people stealing their purse, they whack the guy with the purse and get arrested for assault. Because
so from what I saw in the article, he did actually get out, right?
I don't think they're going to indict him. He was charged. He was arrested. Now everybody could be arrested. Popes, kings, priests, everybody's been arrested. Being arrested is not a big deal. But being indicted is what matters. And I don't believe the jury is going to indict.
Yeah.
I don't actually think it's going to go to court and stuff like that. But this is the law that we're dealing with in the UK, and it's pretty frightening.
And yeah, so I'll be posting the article in the description just so people can kind of look at it. And you said you'll be doing some videos on it, so that'll be cool.
I might just take this clip from the video and put it out because it's just easier to go around.
Yeah, freaking A, self-defense.
It's important. Property rights and the ability to defend your property, I believe, is a fundamental, inalienable right.
Well, like property is theft, man.
Right. Well, to our ANCOM audience, which is probably nobody, yeah, some people believe rent is theft and property is theft, right? It's just.
I crack that joke now with with some of the people that are on the Sarcasm and Liberty stream, I'll just go, yeah, dude, like rent is theft. Because it makes zero sense. Just this idea that sort of what's yours is mine and mine is yours, to the absolute logical end of that, where nothing is anything's. The thing is, they so have you heard of the logic behind rent is theft?
No, I'm not even going to entertain anything like that. But go ahead, tell me.
They basically believe because the building, so the piece of property, like so I'm in my apartment,
right?
This rent is theft because this building is not being actively used to produce a product or service per se. It is not actually putting out something. Like there's not food, clothes, services being sort of put out. I mean, the service is essentially tenancy to live.
Right.
But it's not actively producing in a sort of, in a means that I think it's mainly more of the goods side. It's not actually putting something out there. The product of living is being interpreted as, well, you should just be given a living, like a place to live.
Right.
Like any building or property should be producing something to put out.
So let me get this straight. So if you put a billboard on top of your building, like a sign, technically it's advertising, right? The building is advertising. Does that solve the problem?
I don't think so. I think this building needs to be used as some means of producing a product.
Right, which is advertising. It's an advertising building, and it's so high because it's, people need to see it. That's
a good point. I would actually like to look into sort of the ANCOM ideology just to see how much they rationalize.
I know this is not your ideology. I mean, that logic doesn't make much sense.
It takes some mental gymnastics for sure. Yeah. Now I want to, since we're talking about mental gymnastics and ideology, you remember the thing I brought up to you, something I came across, and I'm not saying I believe it, but I think it's just I entertained it to just for the sake of discussion. Right. Just to really, kind of get the brain working to see like how can I really challenge myself and challenge the people I was talking to.
Right.
This thing called antinatalism.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned that to me this morning. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically it's a philosophical. So they're basically looking at sort of existence. Like existence includes suffering, right?
Right.
Living, you suffer. And so I started questioning, at first, the premise with that was I started to question, okay, well, is there suffering or struggling?
Right.
I think all struggling is suffering, but not all suffering is struggling. I think there's suffering that doesn't mean there's a struggle. Sorry, yeah, you could someone in your life dying is just suffering, I think.
Sure. I get what you're saying.
But then going through a trial, going through something where you are actually struggling to do something. So so let's say starting a business, there is suffering involved, but you're actually struggling because there's an actual outcome that can actually benefit. So I questioned that at first.
Yeah.
And they said it was getting a little subjective. I said, okay. So we talked about suffering in general. So I'll just before I get into all that, antinatalism is the idea that basically because there is suffering in life, existence should be to start and exist, to bring a life into existence is unethical.
Right.
Reproducing, procreating for the sake of bringing a life into existence is doing a disservice to that new existence.
Right.
Because if that child is, going to suffer, that's not right to them. So the best course of action is to never allow them to exist in the first place. Therefore, we're neutral.
Right.
No suffering anymore. which leads down to the path. And so they said, obviously this idea kind of flies in the face of just our biological instinct is, well, we should always like procreate, reproduce after ourselves, be better.
Sure.
Which was the case I was trying to make with them, was to try to argue, well, shouldn't we strive for an existence that is less in suffering?
Correct.
But their whole thing is no suffering, period. And so I started establishing, what is the threshold of suffering then? What if I just, sniffle and I swallow some phlegm or a booger?
Right.
That sucks. Is that suffering? They said, yeah. And I'm like, and they said, not, and then of course they said, well, we know where you're going. You're probably trying to delegitimize suffering in general. I said, no. Well, what I'm saying is, I think the worldview, there is a bias. I said because there's antinatalists, people who are against the having of children to limit suffering. And there's natalists, people who are for the procreation, having children, because they believe it is beautiful. They believe the suffering that the suffering isn't that bad, basically. Like, it's going to happen.
Experience, yeah.
Yeah, life is an experience that should happen. But then they get into, the free will, the rights, the choices. So, like, did anyone choose to be born?
Right.
No one. Now, why would you force an existence to happen against the existence will if there's suffering involved?
Yeah.
So I'm getting that. And I'm kind of like, okay, I can get where you're coming from.
Right.
But it still comes down to a worldview, to a bias. Because I said, well, what if I think life is just great and I am okay with the suffering that happens?
Yeah.
He says, well, you have what's called optimism bias. And I said, what if you have pessimism bias?
Right. They have pessimism bias, yeah.
I said, because I brought up an example of, let's say, nihilism. So I consider nihilism to be a transition phase.
Sure. It's not much of anything, but yeah, you can't really stay there indefinitely.
Right. It's basically when you get red pilled, whether in religion or just certain big core beliefs people have about religion, politics, culture, and stuff. When they get red pilled in some major way, they kind of go through a nihilistic phase where it's like, it's just pointless because, everything I believed was wrong.
Yeah.
And they start to adopt the view on the other side. And I said, what if antinatalism is a product of one of the many products of nihilism? After nihilism, you start to see a view that is basically seeing existence because there is suffering in existence, we should prevent it. So I went down the path. I said, let's say I'm a nihilist.
Right.
And so I live the nihilist life. I'm going out partying, crazy, doing whatever, because it's all pointless, right?
Yeah.
I said, you could probably very much rationalize that life is pointless through some very convincing ways.
Mm-hmm.
I said, but meaning is a very subjective thing. Because
Yeah.
people find meaning. There's no real objective meaning to life.
I agree. So
I go through my nihilistic lifestyle. I sleep with a woman. She gets pregnant. Through a series of events, she has the child. I'm the father.
Right.
Something changes, and I find meaning.
Right.
Now my rationalization for nihilism is gone.
Right.
I said, so I basically put in the subjective element to say, you are an antinatalist or natalist based on a bias, a very subjective bias. You could be one or the other, depending upon what's happened to you.
Correct.
And then they said, well, there have been antinatalists that became antinatalists after having kids.
Sure.
And I'm like, so then I talked about the logical end of it, and I said, well, what about abortion then?
Right.
And then they got into, of course, the when is it a life, when does it feel pain? I said, well, isn't that subjective then too? And of course, I put in the argument of the driving in the dark.
Right.
You see something that looks like a person, do you continue driving or do you keep going?
Right.
Do you keep going or do you try to stop?
Sure.
And then so it was not to say, I'm obviously a natalist, so you have to have that view. But they were actually they liked the fact that I could actually have a civil dialogue about the philosophy.
So who is this they? Are you in like subreddit slash
Exactly.
antinatal?
I'm let's just say I try to I get involved with people and in groups where people are like, they obviously know who I am. They know I have a YouTube channel, but we're not going to go dox each other. We just have conversations. I think a lot of like YouTubers and people like have these communities they go to talk about the more.
Are you talking about Count Dankula's Dank Brigade? Because that's the kind of shit you'll find in there.
No. Dank Brigade, I think, is cancer. Just
Yes. Of course,
I was in there for like
as it should be.
I was in there for a couple days, and my computer's just going nuts. Like, post. I'm just like, whereas if I'm in like the Bunty King Discord, it's like, hey guys, Bunty King's on. Let's have a chat with him. Hey, how's it going, my sweet goats? Oh, hey, yeah, we're all just having a great time. But then in the Dank Brigade, it's like at everyone every single post, and I'm like,
futa, dick pics, just furries.
I mean, every big Discord server has the not safe for work thing, but
right?
They're not like just the Dank Brigade's just going nuts. Like I said, my theory is Discord servers of YouTube personalities will have a majority of the fringe of that person. Right. So the fringe of Bunty King is not that crazy, but the fringe of Dankula is probably pretty like
it's off the charts.
Exactly, and that's what is going to have the majority of. So very reserved to kind of if like what's that?
He's very proud of it. He's like, it's a shitstorm just the way it should be.
Right, which is fine. People can go, but I just don't like the thing like that. I'm not too onto that. Anyways, it's actually it's a Facebook group, and I'll tell you about it later. But I'm in there, and we have a Discord server that we talk about different things. So we talked about this, and they said they like the fact that I could actually I wasn't triggered the moment I heard about it.
Right.
We could actually have the conversation because I'm like, okay. If you just don't want to have kids because you feel that way, great. And they'll share it willingly, but they weren't in any position to say you have to have this view.
Right, sure.
Yeah, they're just like, we believe this because of this. People have been convinced otherwise, and that's that. So, and I thought, all right. So we basically broke down different things, different ideas. I talked about sort of the biases, the optimism bias and the pessimism bias, and because it's like you can say one thing about one way, but people see things differently all the time. And then, of course, they said, well, there's antinatalism applied not just to humans, but also to animals. And then, basically and then to the point, so the one guy I was talking to was saying, he wants to be a vegan because he wants to limit the suffering of animals.
Oh, okay.
Which I get to a point. I'm like, yeah, you want to limit the suffering of animals, but bacon.
I was about to say the same thing. Yeah.
and it's like, I'll just be really honest with people when I talk about these things. I will explore the ideas. I will go down the rabbit holes and talk about the fringes of these beliefs.
Yeah.
But I will also say, I just can't. I'm just not going to believe that. I will have a willful, just say I'm as much as you could show me all the, animal rights videos of how animals are treated.
Yeah.
I'm still going to eat what I'm going to eat.
Sure. No, I get that. I get that.
And I'll just be selfish and say, I care more about the humans.
As do I.
And it's like, I think my criticism of some of these ideologies is we have become so infatuated with our intelligence that we start to deny certain biological and just primitive instincts that we have. We start to invalidate certain aspects of us being humans.
Sure. I see.
To the point that it's just, everything's a social construct.
Yeah, nothing has real meaning.
which is a sense of nihilism, which is bullshit.
Pointless. Yeah, it's pointless.
Right. The very fact that we can subjectively create meaning in our lives, I think, is both a strength and a weakness of humanity, but should not be just thrown out.
I agree.
On one hand, we could be more ethical with the treatment of animals. On the other hand, we gotta eat meat.
Sure.
And people are going to do what they're going to do, and people are still going to buy burgers. I mean,
That's interesting.
Yeah. I consider it like, because we talk, so like the different ends of nihilism. Like I've talked about, like, in some cases I've considered myself what's called an absurdist.
Right.
Basically, yes, there is truth to the fact that a lot of stuff is stupid, it's pointless and such, but I'm going to find meaning in all of it.
Right. Yeah.
And live my life accordingly. I'm going to accept some things and deny some other things. That's just how I think that's just being human in general.
Yeah. I think we're entitled to some irrational beliefs. Like your undying faith in NASA and stuff like that. I think,
Oh, shut up.
I'm just poking fun at you. But yeah, I have to remind myself sometimes when I'm talking to people and I hear them say something that I know is probably not entirely accurate, but I just got to be like, yeah, okay, that's just where they're at. And we encounter that a lot as preachers as well, right? So,
right.
We would have our theology and stuff, and the crowd you're dealing with, where they're at.
Yeah.
And there's just some things you can't tell them. They're not ready for that kind of stuff.
And that's a tough thing for a lot of, when I talked about the sort of the edginess.
Yeah.
I wanted to be an edgelord. Because people who have been, whether they've been burned out, red-pilled, or just shit on by just things they've been involved in, they adopt this edginess for the sake of edginess because, like I said, they grab a hold of something, they're exposed to something that makes them feel like, holy cow, I figured something out. And they take it to a degree where it's like anyone who's ever been in there or holds that view, like they'll deny they'll think that's irrational, therefore no one else is entitled to that irrational view.
Correct.
And then another thing too is, of course, like this whole thing of truth and ideas that Jordan Peterson talks about. So in the same group we talked about like Jordan Peterson and how he talks about like truth. Well, truth, like sort of the truth in stories, even in religions that are not necessarily reasoned truths. Like there's a reasoned truth that if I have a ball and I let go of it, it will drop. I can calculate its velocity, the time it hits, the forces involved, everything. That is truth. But we also believe in a truth that life is, sort of a sanctity of life. Murder is wrong.
Yeah.
You can't reason that truth, so to speak, because in nature, we die.
Right.
We kill each other, Darwinianism, we believe in evolution and survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
But we also care for the mentally handicapped.
Correct.
People who literally cannot function without assistance. Which I think is a well, we could say it is a dissonance that is good.
Yeah, it's the humane acting of modern society.
Yeah, humanity flies in the face of certain natural orders.
Correct, and it's very true. Like up to about 100 years ago, a lot of the people who were mentally ill and stuff like that, they would not have survived, and they definitely would not have reproduced. Of course, we had all the sickness and all this other stuff, but we've created a level of human prosperity and civilization where we are caring for the less fortunate, which is great. I'm not against
somebody. Keep in mind, everyone that is watching, we are not advocating for any crazy nonsense.
We're not into eugenics here, you know.
No. We're just examining sort of human history and how humans are nowadays, and I think it is a testament to how how we can both make sense and not make sense, and how both can be, I think, in different contexts can be truth.
Correct.
People kind of get on Jordan Peterson because when people talk about God, he has this religious view, but he also can say, well, yeah, atheism is also valid as well. And it's like,
right.
And people kind of think he's dissonant and crazy. And it's like, well, you'll believe in, atheists will believe in that there is no proof of God, yet they will hold views that were quote unquote commanded by God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
the moral arguments.
Right. So, anyways. Yeah, it's interesting how we went from YouTube shooter to philosophical.
To God.
To God.
I mean,
the connection between the YouTube shooter and God is an hour and a half.
No, it's an interesting discussion. There was actually an interesting debate on Warski Live not long ago between the theist and the atheist.
Wait, there was a good discussion on Warski Live?
It wasn't a good discussion, no, because the atheist, the mental gymnastics and cognitive dissonance that the atheist went through to try and make his point, it basically showed him to kind of not really understand what he was talking about. Like he was.
And that's the thing. There's unreasonable atheists that are just atheists for the sake of the edginess.
Right. So I mean, what's the big historical historian who, like, he's definitely gone out of his way to prove like the existence of Jesus historically, not religiously, but like through the historical record. I can't remember his name. I think it's Ebert something, but he will lay it out. It's like, look, there was a historical Jesus. He's well attested to from all the evidence we have. We have more evidence for him than we have for Caesar, Nero, Aristotle, Plato, and all these other things. He can't deny that something happened regarding the empty tomb and all this other stuff because of the historical record, but he's not a Christian. He chooses not to believe.
Yeah, I tell people too, like, I'm just looking at the historical figure as an archetype. I'm not looking at, right. I said, take out all the metaphysical, the miracles and the dead, raising from the dead. You got to admit the guy definitely had a message, and he did exist. And I think that is what's important too.
Yeah. And again, it's based on the evidence. Even if you don't have the religiosity behind the person of Jesus, the historical evidence is overwhelming. But at the same time, you could have an atheist present all of the historical evidence for Jesus, even the potential for the empty tomb, and still choose to say, I'm not believing. And in the face of all the evidence, a lot of people, that's just the irrational beliefs that they hold.
It's interesting how, yeah, the very values that allow atheism to exist are what atheism is against. Well, I shouldn't say the values. The belief that created the values to allow atheism to flourish. It's just funny how that works out. Christian, Judeo-Christian values that allow you free will, individual liberties, freedom of speech, freedom of just believing what you want to believe and saying what you want to say, gives atheists a place to flourish and discuss and essentially exist freely. Yeah. And then they're like, they try to throw it all out. And it's like, if you throw it all out, you're not going to be able to believe that then.
No, it's a real dilemma, especially amongst the YouTube skeptics and the atheist bunch.
And I'm not saying them they have to believe anything. It's just like,
no, you don't have to
atheism, but acknowledge that religion played a role.
Yeah, you cannot look to Western civilization and the history of Western civilization and not find Christianity heavily interwoven throughout the history of the West. And to deny that and try to say that we could get away from that without serious consequences, we've seen other nations that didn't have it, and they didn't turn out that great, right?
And here's another thing too. They will, even the skeptic community that is anti-SJW,
Yeah,
they will acknowledge that you will always have racists and sexists, and those views will always exist
yeah,
because we're just, but they're allowed to have those views, however
yeah.
shitty they are. Can't they then extend that same liberty out to the religious? That as much as they believe that they're irrational, they don't agree, that they have every right to exist.
Yeah, I think that is the inability, and again, this goes back to my liberalist purity test. This purity test on being a skeptic or whatever the community is called, having to be an atheist is being edgy and whatever the case might be. That's not honest dialogue. And if you're not going to acknowledge that in the culture war, what we're fighting, the SJWs and this progressivisms, the church, the Catholic Church and others and the religious are allies because they believe in truth. They believe in, two genders, as the case might be. A lot of the ideology that we are fighting against, the church has been fighting against for a long time. And in this regard, in this culture war, the religious are allies. I mean, not the fundamentalist extremists. I'm talking about, the mainstream types of movements and stuff like that. And if you're not even going to willingly accept that, your movement is lost. If you're going to attack even the people who are really on your side and you can't make that distinction, you're not effective.
So what you're saying is you're advocating for the new crusades?
Unfortunately, that might be coming. The state of Europe, that might actually be coming. As a guy once said it, white people are very nice until they're not.
21st century Deus Vult.
Yeah, it's like, Europe took a lot of hits. 900 years of aggression from is it 400 years of aggression from Islam before the First Crusade. And as I say, like, you look at Germany, man, when the Germans aren't happy, they tend to do a lot of damage, so yeah, white people are fine until they're not fine, and then it could get pretty serious.
Oh jeez. Ugh. Crazy, bro. Well, I'm surprised we made a whole hour and a half shooting the shit.
Awesome. It's good stuff, man.
We didn't get any viewers, which is fine. But I know definitely we're definitely getting out there. I mean, with all the connections we're making, we definitely have more people watching.
Sure.
As well, whether during the stream or afterwards. So, but yeah, anything you wanted to add on, Brooke, or anything?
I think we're good. I think I don't know why we're offending all our guests and why we can't seem to get them on.
Hey, I think we should be glad we're even having guests to begin with. So
sure. I'm not knocking them entirely. I'm just giving them a quick dig. But no, I think this is good. We'll try and keep up the content nonetheless, even if we don't have the guests. I think there's enough between us, to fill at least an hour, if not an hour and a half. So I'm not too worried. So
yeah, thanks everyone for watching, for joining us. If you did join, at least I didn't notice anyone join, but hey, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe to my channel and the video, as well as Brooke's channel. All the info, of course, is below. You can follow both of us on Twitter. Yeah, let us know. And yeah, thanks for joining us today, guys.
Yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Take care.
We will see you